the robotic technologies. And in some universities, they've managed to implant into the brain of an insect.
No, it was very funny. I enjoyed that show now because they were, opening their mouth and a creamy eclair would come out of it. Because this other unknown.
Actually, God doing that then.
And they're pulling it. And the universe is expanding and contracting. In the room, 52 Jokers Wild.
We've had our interns working with us this week, and it's been quite exciting because they've generated quite a few little ideas for us of what we could talk about and what we could do on the show. And just again, to get a different perspective, because Garvin's always talked about making sure that you don't get stuck in the silo. And we started to think about some of the problems what is that silo that we're finding ourselves being forced into? And does the silo, as you get into it, compress? Do you remember Star Wars? Because we talked about Star Wars. They found themselves in the rubbish pit and it compressed in, and
is that number? I know it was the first one, but it was probably the sixth. I don't know the Star Wars etiquette. I think it's 4.
It was episode 4. Episode 4, yeah.
Right, there you go. What a great way to start. Yeah. Start on number 4, go to 27, work back to 2. But I do remember them all in the rubbish compactor or the refuse compacter.
And it was the silo compressing
some underwater, lizard was there to try and get. Actually, great special effects. Couple of bubbles underwater, someone in a rubber suit sort of stuck his arse up out of the air every now and again to give him a little fright. Brilliant. I don't know what the budget was for that piece. Actually, I believe the Star Wars, that episode now nearly didn't get made. The difficulty was raising the budget. And even then, they got some great special effects, which were not actual special effects. They were, models they built or workarounds or God knows what. But it wasn't CGI per se. It was a great use of minimum budget.
That's the problem. They were actually special effects. They weren't CGI. They weren't computer generated. They were back to the old way of working where you fix problems using, if it didn't work on set, it didn't go into the film type idea. And what's quite interesting is the new technologies that are using the front projection type things or the screen projection, they've gone back to that same thing. If it can't be done on set, it won't end up in the movie because that's more cost effective. So it's kind of, but we were looking into this idea of the silo and how does the silo compress? And I'm actually thinking of a sphere. Here's a little sphere I've got here. It's the moon. My old moon type thing. But does it contract? Does it go woo? And does it get smaller and smaller? And do the ideas that get in it get compressed and get compressed so much that it turns into something different and everybody just thinks, oh, that's all it is. A bit like 1984, which we discussed, where they kept pruning down the language so that you could be very, very concise without having any meaning within what you're actually saying. And we were actually discussing earlier on, just a short time ago, about how we seem to be siloed for marketing purposes. And one of the difficulties that we've got is that if we're just watching ourselves through the computers all the time, we get to meet people that are like-minded. So like-minded that you can't even have an argument. And one of the great things that Garvin and I are having is that we do have arguments because we're not thinking the same way. We're coming from totally different perspectives. And in one sense, because of the situation that we found ourselves in with this pandemic that's gone through, we've had to look at other ways to interact and socialize with people, and we're finding different ways and we're adapting. But in one sense, there are people that are saying, oh, I'm not getting to see as many people as I used to physically. But in one reality, they're actually now getting to see more and more people through the internet that they wouldn't normally have had a chance to connect with. And I think that's the interesting thing about having these current students. We might not have been able to work with the interns that we currently have if it wasn't for the technologies. So there is some good things that are actually going on. Now, I was getting kind of a little bit on my hobby horse about the fact that if you don't get a chance to get out and meet people, then you don't get a chance to socially interact and you end up with everybody having the same kind of mind. But what was interesting was that Garvin came up with another idea about what's really going on from a marketing perspective. So I think I'll hand over for you just to go into that little bit if you can remember. Because it was actually quite fascinating.
I can't remember.
You can't remember?
No. What
you were talking about?
No, I can't. I can't remember. Like it was only 15 minutes ago or 10 minutes ago, so I have some hope of remembering. But no, what happens? Actually, I saw an article on LinkedIn yesterday. I didn't read it. I just saw the heading, and it was talking about customer profiling or creating customer avatars, so you can figure out who you're trying to target your product and services to. So unless you have this generic makeup of what your perfect customer looks like, you're not going to be able to communicate to them in a language that they resonate with, because they all see, everyone sees themselves as different. And they are. Everyone's a unique individual. Where there's whatever 7.5 billion people on the planet, but everybody is not this. Everyone's different, but the same. Because if they weren't a little bit of the same, and in the sense of there's clusters, there's males between the age of 30 and 35 that have particular, psychological or psychosomatic, physiological, geographic. I mean, you have to be able to classify them under certain headings. I can't actually remember the particular sort of terminology for it. It might be psychographics is one of the, and demographics and this type of thing. So the computer, the AI needs to know who it's targeting for Facebook, for LinkedIn, for Twitter. It wants to put out your story or your product to where you told it to put it out to. I want to talk to customers that are that could become, or people that can become my customer, because that's what the game is about. The monetization of the Facebooks and the Twitters is all about the adverts. And who's paying for the adverts? The businesses. Why are they paying for it? Because they want, this is their sales and marketing strategy. This is their advertising, and they want to hit their target customer at the cheapest cost of acquisition. And that cost of acquisition is how much does it cost me to acquire that customer, or at least influence them in a way that they react and seek me out versus my competitor, and maybe if I get the best call to action, buy my product, order it, and then keep on buying it on a regular basis, even better, and buy more of it. So it's this is the game. Now, what the algorithm wants to know is, I'll pay my pay-per-click figures, I'll pay you 10 quid per keyword, but why I'm doing that on a regular basis, and I put a budget for my social media marketing, is if it returns like a return on investment, and what that normally is the cost of customer acquisition. I will keep on doing it as long as it leads to sales. That is the priority. Who am I selling to? Well, I want someone that wants to buy widgets. I want everybody that wants to buy widgets. Therefore, who needs widgets is what the question is. And the algorithm on the platforms, each individual platform's algorithm is collecting your data. At the first thing you do when you sign up to a platform, it gives you a chunk of terms and conditions, and hidden in the language somewhere is, we're going to collect every piece of data about you that exists, that you interact with us, and we're going to join it to a couple of other data sets. And what we're actually doing is profile. In the 1984, we're profiling the making of you, what you eat, what you do, what time you sleep, what programs you watch, what you spend, what you earn, what you wear, who you are, who your friends are, what they do. We're drowning. Well, we're not personally drowning in the information. One of the biggest growth businesses out there, and actually a couple of the sayings have said, data is more valuable than oil. And it's not the data, it's the intelligence within the data is more valuable than oil. And we're building data centers to we're going to have more data than data centers if we keep on keeping all the past, unless we start doing that magic maths that's out there that keeps on compressing the amount of volume of data that you can store and keep in a smaller bit of some sort of technology. But data is power, data is information, and data can be sold. It is equal to revenue. That's why these platforms and how these platforms make money. And what the data is who your customer, where are they, and what are they willing to buy, and who from at what price, and what can we charge you for the privilege to put those generic clusters of somebody's in front of you into your business. Now, it's a long answer, but everyone's different, but everybody eats, drinks, and sleeps. Everyone spends money. We all wear clothes. We think we're unique, but there's in a 7 billion source data set, there's a lot of sames going on. There's a lot of silos. We think we'll probably walk down the road somewhere on the planet and bump into ourselves wearing the exact same clothes or driving the same car. So I'll send it back to George, otherwise he never get a chance to speak.
Well, I was actually getting quite worried because at one point we had 5.8 billion in this conversation, and I was kind of going, oh my God, 2 billion people have just disappeared off the planet. Then we went up to 7 billion. And what might surprise Garvin is that currently the planet has 7.8 billion people on the planet. It's going up. It's going up so quickly. It's unbelievable.
It depends if they're awake or not. I think I was dropping it from 7.8 to 5.3 based on what sort of polar eclipse or rotation of the sun, that what part of the planet's on. Because if they're asleep, they're not eating or drinking. So I think it's the data set that's awake and willing to buy.
Yeah, well, we see now that becomes something quite interesting as well, because now we have to start to think about who can actually buy in that 7.8 billion. And we'll probably find out that it's actually less than a million, or a billion rather, people that would be in the who could actually afford to live and pay for something that everybody's actually offering. So there becomes quite an interesting kind of moral and ethical sort of question that starts to arise, because we were talking about the social activities. And one of the things that sprung to mind was that there's a book out called Surveillance Capitalism, which is the new form of capitalism. And Garvin's actually been talking about that quite a bit in that last session, because that is the data collection and mining that's going on within that. And they're using that kind of terminology, especially, I mean, Garvin doesn't like the Bitcoin thing, but they're using that idea of mining down and gathering information and gathering stuff. And it almost becomes very abstract because it doesn't relate to our ordinary everyday lives. But what's interesting is that it is a way of actually programming our ordinary everyday lives, because we start to accept certain bits of information that are being pumped to us through the social media and through the other forms of advertising that we see around us, and other forms of propaganda and stuff, which is great. We do start to find that we're getting very, very close in our conversations to the more sci-fi worlds that we actually see ourselves in. Because I think if you went back to 1984, the real year 1984 when we were living, if you started to talk to people about the technologies that we're currently using, they'd probably freak out. They'd probably be quite sort of shocked. And they would actually have that kind of cognitive dissonance that their minds would explode because of the technologies and how we're actually using it. It would be data overload. Now, something else that was quite interesting, because we were talking about, I think Rebecca is one of our interns, had actually suggested a few ideas. And we were talking about if we're being controlled. Elon Musk has actually recently implanted something into a monkey. And I was watching another video by chance yesterday.
I'd rephrase that sentence if you could. There's a chip. He's putting it, and where he's implanting it is in his brain. It's in his head. Don't think any further of any imagery that could potentially be in that sentence.
That's just Garvin's mind that's going on. But another video that I was actually watching yesterday as well was actually looking at the robotic technologies. And in some universities, they've managed to implant into the brain of an insect, so like a flying insect. Mm-hmm. And they were able to basically control where that insect flew just through the computers and connecting it to its mind. And you kind of go, whoa, so Elon Musk is doing the same thing with chimps. How long will it be before they encourage us to do something? One of the other videos that I saw was about, now this is kind of rumor stuff, but we talked about the glasses. How long will it be? If you think of Joe 90, which is from the 60s, wearing his glasses, and they were able to program all kinds of things so he could become an expert. And that reminds you of the Matrix, where Neo downloads all this skill tech and allows him to fly a helicopter and whatnot, or Trinity to fly the helicopter. You're sitting there going, all these ideas from 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago that people just imagined are now actually being implemented in our world, in our society, in what we're actually doing. And you do get to the, I'm in a log cabin sort of talking to Garvin, who's in his office at the moment, sort of 2 hours drive away from one another. are we going to get to the point where, as the monkey in one of the experiments realized it didn't actually need to use its limbs because it realized it's through its own mind, it could control things around it, which is a bit like the virtual reality games that all our kids are actually playing. Another thing that Rebecca talked about was that when she was a kid, she went out into the street and played around, which I remember doing. You know, you ran around in gangs and you made all these trolleys, as they call them, go-karts, and sort of put car bits on them and pedals on them and brakes on them and all kinds of crazy things that you did as in your little gangs, which is another silo, I suppose. Nowadays, it's can you create a 3D model that will go and play in Unity or Unreal engines, game engines, and it's all about games theory. Even the counselling courses I'm working on is about games theory and about how we all play games with one another. So although there are sort of ethical and sort of moral issues that sort of arise, you suddenly realise that we are all playing a game. It's trying to work out how that game works and how do we make it function for our best advantage. And that's where I think, again, it comes back to this sense that that's why you have to have diversity between the people that you're talking to, so that you could get another view, another perspective of what's happening, because you can get to a point where your mind is so blinkered because the thing has crushed you in that you can't see out, and you need that other person to give you a different perspective to help guide you out of it. So I hope the technology doesn't actually collapse in so much that we can't see our way forward.
No, you were talking about, I stopped listening there for a little while because I found a little subject in my own head and I was trying to concentrate and remember it. I'll listen to this show later on and hear what you said later. But I'm going back to an earlier show, and it's a little bit of mindfulness and it's a little bit of the universe and it's a little bit of talking about at what point do you stop being you? And what it is I was thinking of Robocop. And I think he lost a leg, an arm, most of his body. Actually, depends on which version of Robocop you're probably watching. And they were programming his personality was still in there, but I'm not too sure how many body parts were gone, or if he was fully Robocop. It was pretty much all that was left was his brain, and maybe not even 3/4 of that, but he was in there, and that started me thinking about the soul, and at what point do you stop being you and become the robot if you can replace all the parts? So we lose an arm. You know, we've got some prosthetics out there, and we're starting to move towards nanotechnology and mechanical bits and pieces. That if we think of Elon Musk's brain chip and the monkey you were talking about earlier on, being able to use their thought waves and interface with some chip that can actually now move this arm as an extension and do what it needs to do in terms of the functionality, but it's triggered by the brain waves and it's a human interaction moving the parts. So it just feels like an extension of you as opposed to a robotic something. But Robocop, I was thinking, how many parts, at what point do we lose the you? And there was, I think, George, we mentioned some other show whereby some people think the soul actually resides nearer their heart, or there's a full aura that if you take all the parts away and you look through some sort of X-ray glasses or some aura glasses, you'll still see the shape and the essence of the human form of the you, which might be the soul, just looks like a ghostly figure, a non-corporeal figure, but it's not a little dot. It's a full body shape with 2 legs, 2 arms and a head, in a shape or shadow version of you. And I was thinking, right, why am I thinking this in terms of marketing or otherwise? But I go, no, there's tech here. There's extending your life. The tech is marketing its product. It's has to be bought. That's not going to be free, I'm sure. Okay, hopefully in Star Trek time, we can mass produce this tech and with these materials, and maybe the machines are automated building the tech for us so we can live forever, but no one's getting paid because there's no money, because Bitcoin is gone. But and everybody is pursuing the furtherance of their creativity and life and all the rest of it. But we have 7.8 billion on the planet at the moment. Every second you talk, that goes up and down like a lunatic. It's those life streams live longer. Some live to 100 years, some live to a day. But again, it wasn't that 50 years ago. It could have been half that 50 years ago. We are potentially at a tipping point, but if we go a little bit further and technology allows, who gets to live, who gets to die, who gets to live forever, according to Freddie Mercury, who wants to live forever? even if you could. At what point is it pointless of doing that because you run out of things to do? But if you're tapped into the inner something and creativity, why wouldn't you want to live forever? Because as long as you're not bored, then why not keep on going as long as you can afford it? So we're not Robocop. We're not inside. We don't have these options. We dream of them. We make films about them. We fantasize about it. It's not going to be for everybody. It's not going to be available for everybody. But maybe the spirit is eternal and the body is just, on the way to Robocop. The body will wear out. There can be mechanical parts that'll keep it going a bit longer, but at some point in time, it could be 130 years, you have time enough in your bodily part, it's to go on a spiritual journey off the corporal plane. No, back to you, George.
Well, in 1970, there was 3.683 billion people. So actually, there is more than double the number today than was 50 years ago. Actually, it should go to 1971. Actually, 3.761 billion. Yep, so exactly half the number of people were on the planet in 1971 as there is today, which in itself is actually quite amazing. What was really, really fascinating was that whereas you thought you were going off on a different story with what you were talking about, it actually fitted in really perfectly to what I'd just been talking about beforehand. It really is. It's actually amazing. So that's where the synchronicity actually comes into what we're actually talking about. Because one of the things that is quite fascinating is, as you said, we've got all these people on this planet, and they are not just sort of physical entities. Now, we see ourselves as being materialistic, but there is, when we start to get into quantum physics and when we start to get into what the concepts of religion are all about, there is this sense of there are different parts of us. There's this kind of spiritual element as well as there is the physical element, and there is a period of time that we are connected. Now, in certain religions, they have the idea of reincarnation, where we come back, which is the altered carbon kind of concept, if you like, which is really, this is why science fiction is the most amazing thing to actually explore.
Oh, they're not coming back there, George. The whole point is they have them stored in the cloud and they keep on reloading them. But if the data gets corrupted, you're gone.
You're gone.
I think they said if you break their sleeves, you can load up and load down into the clone, into the body that they've built and grown. But if you break, there's a certain part of them that is that storage device, that link.
Yeah.
And if that link is broken, I think in the program itself, in one of the episodes, that's the way to kill you. They'd smash that part. I can't remember the name of it, but once that was gone, you're gone. But I mean, as long as you have that bit, you can keep on reloading and growing and keep on adding in the data stream.
Well, I think, but when you actually sort of analyze those kind of TV shows and a lot of the sci-fi of Philip K. Dick, he's actually exploring sort of religious concepts and trying to, grapple with the concept of when did the being actually connect to the physical humanness. And then there's also the concept because Buddhism has this kind of concept that we are actually just spiritual, that everything around us, the material world, is just an illusion, which is fantastic because that's the concept that most gamers are playing when they go into the virtual reality game. So we're actually finding that a lot of the genesis of these ideas within the games that we're playing are actually coming from that exploration of who are we, what are we, and who am I? What is the real me? What is it that exists? Because day by day you actually look in the mirror and you see the container that you're in, the little silo, because we're in a mini silo, is getting older and older and older, and yet the mind inside it is actually doesn't perceive itself to be any different to what it was when it first arrived. And I heard a great story told by a Jewish rabbi about the fact that all the souls in heaven basically have, when they get told that they have to come back, a bit like your sleeve thing, they have to come back to this world, and it takes them 3 months to come to terms with the fact, oh my goodness, I have to leave this place to go and inhabit this thing that will restrict me for 20 score years or whatever it is, 4 times 20 score years kind of thing. And isn't that irritating? And they also have this thing that the reason why that most people are supposed to have that mourning period at the end, it's not for them to weep over the loss. It's actually to be there as a supporting mechanism for the soul actually going back to heaven, because it's transitioning from being a corporal thing to just a spirit. So there is some interesting things that are about that, which do connect up to all the sci-fi stuff. You know, are we materialistic? Is that what it's all about? And it's fascinating, because when you actually get into conversations with most people, whether they've abandoned their idea of what God is and all that, or they talk about the universe, they still see that there's something actually influencing their lives. We've talked about this quite a bit, that there is something outside. Now, is it that there is the universe or God, or is it that it's the internet and Elon Musk is basically just the one that's controlling us?
No, there's other maths
digital stuff, you know, or are we just an illusion ourselves because we are just a hologram?
Yeah. No, what I was trying to say there for a second, well, it's popped into my head. It goes back to your numbers, even in the last 50 years. This 3.8 billion to 7.8 billion journey, if they're all souls. And then you're saying, where were the other 4 billion faffing about in the meantime for the 50 years in question? Is it a slow release drip feed from some well of souls? I think we touched on that subject before. Or is it that there's a billion stars and there's a billion suns, and out there's other planets that, you know, there's a complement of souls moving between, you know, universes. But if the universe is all connected, we perceive distance and based on our constructs of time and distance and length, where actually if you're thinking in the sense of folding space and wormholes, then A to B is it's all the same point. And actually time is in Einstein's theory is not necessarily relative, it's all parallel, and every point in time exists all the time, and you can go flow either direction or crossways or sideways or every which way and Sunday. It doesn't matter. But is there a defined number of souls? If we say there's energy cannot be created or destroyed, therefore this journey from 4 billion to 8 billion, they were always there, always have been there. They were just somewhere else, because we were only counting and perceiving them based on our understanding of 1970 to 2020 was 4 to 8 billion. But I mean, that's looking in this linear direction, where if you looked from sideways, it was always 8 billion. It's possibly 12 billion. It could be 100 billion. It's just on planet 1 and planet Z and somewhere else, and it all exists together. And the greater thing, it's just moving around, back and forward, sideways, and through wormholes and back again. That's what wrecks people's minds in terms of if things. Certain definitions of science definitions, energy cannot be destroyed, souls cannot be destroyed. Well, if they can't be destroyed, can they be created? No, they were always there. Well, where's the other 4 billion? Is there, you know, and if you go back 50 years before that, there was 1 billion. Where was the 7 billion? What were they up to? No, they're always there. That's just our concept of time. Are we energy? What is time? And therefore, does the maths is broken depending on our perception of it. But maybe it was always correct because maths is the wrong language. We don't even know what the language is. So I love those sort of conversations. It can wreck your head. We're back to the algorithms. We're back to the AI. We're back to going, all we are is a consumer consuming consumables at points in time. We're either naked or we're dressed. We're neither hungry or we're full. We're either broke or we're rich, but we only are aware for a distance in time relative to where we're looking, if that makes sense. Well, I don't think it does.
It does. Absolutely, because they're talking about by the year 2100, they reckon there could be nearly 11 billion people on the planet. And it's quite interesting because I decided to go back and just check through one of these. In the year 1900, there was actually 1.6 billion people on the planet.
Right, we've a tenfold now going on.
Now, what's quite interesting, if we then go back to now that's 1900, there was 1.65. We go back to the year 1000. Hang on. Is it there?
Now, I don't believe that now, because you don't know. This is the weird one where we don't have the computers. Wow. We're making up the statistics. We're extrapolating.
Yes.
It could have been, it was 9.7 billion, and no evidence remains to say. because we cannot, because we've no facts today that can actually prove or disprove. That's our assumptions.
Well, the thing is that the evidence that they have, that the archaeologists would do, is that and they would actually carbon date back to see what there was. And they are actually claiming that, let's look now, in 1800 they reckon there was less than a billion people on the planet. There was 9.90 million people. But by the time you go back, this looks daft. They're saying if you go back to, now I don't know who's actually created this statistic, but they're actually saying if you go back 10,000 years, well, actually 10,000 BC,
people.
There was 2 people. They've actually got 2 people.
That's perfectly right, because it's Adam and Eve. We're back to this show and Adam and Eve. We have to go back to, actually, there you go again, none. If we think of evolution and Darwinian evolution, there wasn't 2 monkeys becoming 2 humans overnight, if that was to jump. Well, there had to be about 100,000 defectors running around and evolving genetically on multiple points and locations. Therefore, at what point is there 2? It doesn't make sense. And if you had 2, then never mind the maths on other statistics of, are we the broken statistic based on starting from a 2 that knew each other? Because if they hadn't known each other, maybe we would have been that other bunch with the elongated skulls and it'd be a little bit more intelligent.
Well, that's the thing. Where do they come from? Because you've got the Neanderthals sort of died out around about somewhere around about that time, and there seemed to be the Homo sapiens species had actually sort of arrived and was starting to compete with it. So at the moment we killed off all the Neanderthals, but they were around for quite some time, well before the humans had actually turned up. And what about the dinosaurs? What about their souls? What about the T-Rexes?
No, but
and the Stenosauruses?
I'm very happy to stick to the Douglas Adams Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and the dinosaurs were just bones placed in sand to annoy later archaeologists and make them confused.
Were they 3D printed?
What the hell is it was actually a plan to distract, because they went this direction and that direction. They're finding these big, huge bones, and it just doesn't make sense. There's some alien out there having a laugh. And that was what they were doing. It's just they're planting history to be found in order, and that's where they had those other anomalies, like those screws and light bulbs stuck with million-year-old rock in the middle of it. Just give them something that when they find it, it just destroys all their preconceived notions before that.
Well, actually, I have a theory now, and I think my little theory that I'm just about to sort of develop as we talk, and because of the conversation we've been having, I believe that there's God on one side and there's the universe on this side, and they have an accordion between the 2 of them, and they're actually pulling it, so time keeps sort of stretching out, and then it keeps getting compressed in, and then it gets stretched out, and they're making these kind of weird noises kind of thing, backwards and forwards. And you end up with this tune that's coming along, and we're actually the tune, we're actually the music that is actually left afterwards, called human beings. And
the imagery that gave me is Stephen Hawking's Brief History of Time. And what it is the universe. I think he postulated when he was in his college days that the universe is still expanding, and we don't know how. I think it was a mention of an elastic band. It's like saying, at what point are we on that expansion of pulling that elastic band all the way out? Now, again, where the center of the universe is doesn't really matter for the moment. There was a big bang, and it's going out in all directions. It's going out from that point of origin, and it's expanding. And later on, when the tech allowed, further into his career, they were able to measure the speed of light from distant stars and planets that showed the measure had actually got longer and further away from earlier measure points, which then showed that had moved away at X speed. Therefore, it was still expanding, and it proved his null hypothesis became proven hypothesis, because the tech arrived to prove the point. And he had other certain theories about stuff not being able to, nothing can escape the pull of a black hole. But he since, I think, before he died, I think he said, no, there are things that can escape this event horizon and all that, or come out of the black hole. But earlier on, that was the hypothesis, and the null hypothesis, because no one could even find a black hole. No one could disprove it because he couldn't even measure. This was all ideology based on assumption and preposition and everything else. But then to take a ride, and they could. But you just said the accordion, and it's been stretched out. That's the elastic band. That's the universe. So it's not the universe fighting God. The universe is the actual accordion in the middle. So there's this other unknown. And
actually God doing that then.
And they're pulling it. And this is the universe is expanding and contracting over time. So when it expands to the full of the elastic band, what happens next is it's the elastic band starts to pull back.
Yeah.
And they are saying this will happen. Now, how many million years it's going to take to do that? It doesn't matter. But what's going to happen at the end, restaurant at the end of the universe is it all comes back and starts contracting, and suns and the black hole swallows suns, and suns implode into white dwarfs, and all the above happen. And 6 billion years from now is the end of our universe as we know it. But there's multiple million universes out there. But if we follow that hypothesis, the elastic band universe will at some point start to contract. We don't need to worry about it. Some generational, ancestor. I can never get this right. Not our ancestor, but our further generations of our children's children will have that problem if we're lucky. But again, if you go from 1 billion to 10 billion to 20 billion in a couple of hundred years, this planet, in the absence of something we don't know now, is going to be well past the tipping point, and effectively it cannot sustain even the amount of air being bred in and out there in terms of carbon monoxide, unless we figure out how to store it. And if the ice caps are melting and that's been released from the past, we're not going to have the problem of worrying about that, and neither will our future generations, because we have to come up with new tech to store carbon monoxide, shoot it into space, able to sustain generating food for these mass populations.
Well, I think what you've actually just now been discussing there is we went back to the idea of frequency. So once it goes out, it has to come back. You can't have an up without a down. You have the up and down frequency, and we've been talking about the expanse. So the problem was, I think the likes of Stephen Hawking and all that, they didn't have a measurement to measure the biggest distance because they weren't around long enough to actually get the big. So the frequency was only on part of it. One of the other concepts that you suddenly started to talk about there, which kind of reminded me of the film Tenet that's just been out recently, was the fact that actually, if it's going back, there is somewhere in this universe or an alternative universe where we are actually talking about what we're doing now, and as opposed to watching our waveforms going one way and being created, it's being unraveled the other way, and we're actually doing the Benjamin Button stint of going backwards from dying, being born, dying and becoming something, and then actually being born, but the other way around, and actually doing everything in reverse. And they're sitting there kind of going, God, flipping heck, look what they have to do. They have to be born and go through and die to come back.
You're actually, there was an episode of Red Dwarf.
Yeah.
And I think it was called Backwards. It may not have been. They arrived on whatever planet, and it said Nodnall or something, which was London, I think it was. And that's exactly what was happening. They were moving forward in a backwards time-flowing world. Now, it was very funny. I enjoyed that show now because they were opening their mouth and a creamy eclair would come out of it, and they'd put it back on the table and take money, and the girl would pay them for their own money back. Yeah. But I mean, as you said, when they wanted to do what the bear does in the woods, it was going the opposite direction. You don't want to be doing that. But at the same time, you're going,
small-minded detail.
I don't believe in that concept of time traveling backwards and people being, dying and then working back to being like a fetus. It doesn't make sense to me.
But the alternative view he can't make sense of what we're doing. So it still works.
No, I'm saying what I'm talking about is if the universe starts contracting, it's not that it starts just actually unfolding backwards. I think it's actually you've reached the thing, the stretch of the elastic band. But the elastic band started off as an elastic band to begin with, or it came from a point and grew. But it's not that it's going backwards. It's actually, that was one journey. This is a different one. It's contracting. It's not going back in time. we're not. I don't believe time is contracting. It's going to take 1 billion years for it to contract back to the point of origin and end in terms of a big bang. No, not a big bang. Well, the other way around, as you say.
Implode.
But it's implode. That's the word I was looking for. So actually, it's a restaurant at the end of the universe. I just said, I don't know. They're waiting for the universe to. No, it was probably implode. But again, that's a different action. It's not.
No, I know.
The bang. It's not a thing in reverse in the terms of a camera, because if you thought of every spin of the universe and things that were destroyed or blew up or got sucked into black holes, that already happened on the expansion. That sun is not going to reappear out of a black hole on the contraction. I don't know. I think that's sort of a bunch of physicists and nuclear physicists and scientific, sort of people that sit in the room and go, what does the reverse journey of the universe or the multiple universes actually look like? Will suns be reborn from death throes, or is it just it's going to flow backwards or get pulled to the center? It's not flowing backwards. It's the same journey, the second part of it.
And I think we better come to an end here. I think what we better do at this particular point in time, in ending, is actually concentrate on the now and forget about the future, forget about the past, forget about expansion, forget about compression. Although we better think about compression when we're rendering out this video for everybody to look at. But we need to concentrate and be in the present and start to relax and enjoy life.
And the great thing is, you always are. That's what the whole conversation was about. We're only in the present. And it doesn't matter. That was history 200 years ago. That's history 5 billion years from now. Doesn't affect us, can't affect us. We can influence in the now, and that's all that matters. But of course, the great thing about it is we can have these conversations in the now than having a bland conversation. We can be talking about the universes. We can talk about infinity. We can talk about multiple life forms and the future of tech. In the now, we can dream, we can aspire. We don't need to talk about nothing and watch Coronation Street.
But what is important is that old men go to pubs, have a beer and talk about nonsense and actually sort out the rest of the world and figure out all the problems that there are. That's an important social activity that should never be in the past, and it should always be in the now and in the future. And we should always enjoy a good pint over a discussion that taxes our thoughts and our memories and our ideas and actually is exciting, because that's where you generate ideas for a new product and new ideas for anything you want to think about. Thanks for listening to us. We may have got into a little bit of a muddle with our future, our past, and our compressions and our implosions and explosions, but it's been very thought-provoking, so we hope you enjoyed this episode. Come and listen to us every Friday on our podcasts, on our YouTube, and see the little extracts that we are putting together on Facebook and Instagram and all those other places that we're about to invade, because we will explode everywhere very soon. Bye for now.
Bye for now. Enjoy your personal universe, or move to someone else's. Catch you soon. Take care. Bye-bye. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe and click on the bell for notifications.